Welcome back to The Cure for Cowardice. Now, in this one, I wanted to talk about, well, there's a couple things that I want to talk about, so I'll probably make a couple videos, but first thing I wanted to talk about is when to stand your ground and when to bend. Now, it's very, very, very specific depending on the situation, but there is obviously times when it's okay to be lenient, it's okay to be understanding, and when it's okay to pretty much let things slide, so to speak. And there's also times when you need to stand your ground and assert yourself and make a point. Now, I feel like that's something that almost none of us get right all the time. Actually, yeah, none of us get that right all the time. It's impossible. It's a human condition. Because ultimately, we're going to get things wrong, and we're going to push in situations where we should give, and we're going to give in situations where we should push. But I think if we are able to define for ourselves what hills are worth dying on before we actually come to them, then it's going to be a lot easier in general. Now, there's a very fine line here. Like most things, it's not binary, it's a spectrum. It's to what degree are you going to stand your ground and be assertive. And I think the trap that we all fall into is we want to be as agreeable, as compassionate, as sympathetic as possible. And so we let things slide and just keep sliding and keep sliding until eventually we reach a point where we have to draw a firm line in the sand. But the problem is, when that time comes, we overreact and we overcompensate, and all of a sudden we are no longer acting fairly or in accordance with who we want to be. And so control in everything is important, but especially control when it comes to our emotional reactions, I think is probably one of the most important things that we need to have complete control over, or as much as we possibly can. And so a lot of it is just being aware of our emotions, being aware of how we feel, because if we know not just what upsets us, but to what degree we are upset, to what degree something is causing us to become emotional, then it becomes a lot easier to actually rein it in and to more or less stop the pot from boiling over in situations where it starts to simmer. And I think that there's a lot of ways that we could go about doing it, but it all just comes down to knowing ourselves and to knowing what buttons that we should not allow to be pushed, because they're more likely to cause us to have a big reaction. And so when somebody, or first off, when you figure out what that is, what buttons not to push, what things to not mess with, what types of patients you should not allow to be tried, we need to be firm in that. And whether that's our friends, loved ones, family, acquaintances, whatever, our co-workers, or just strangers, whoever it is that's pushing that boundary, they have to know where the line is. And there's a lot of ways that you can communicate that, but as long as you are calm about it and very direct and clear, I think that that's a great start. But then, even beyond that, I think that if we are able to... That's a little dog. If we are able to remove ourselves from a situation when we recognize that things are being pushed to the point where we are going to have some kind of reaction, I think that's probably the best way to do it, because with time and space, all things become less sharp, and we're able to get a better grasp and better understanding of the situations. And so, number one, understanding your boundaries, understanding your hot buttons, what's going to actually make you fly off the handle versus what you can sit there and deal with all day. That's going to be number one. But number two is figuring out exactly where those boundaries lie, and at what point is the point of no return, or rather the point where you are exponentially more likely to react in a bad way. Number three is making others aware of those lines and where they stand, and communicating that in such a way where you're not coming across as threatening or unreasonable or illogical, but being very clear and direct about it. And there's any number of ways to do that. The reason I bring this up is because I had a relatively serious argument with one of my best friends earlier, and I knew that it was a hot button for me, and it was a situation that I was already upset about something else. And so I led with, let this conversation be over, or else it's not going to go well. Like, basically, the conversation is not going to get any better than this, so just let it be done. And he did not accept that, which is his right. But at the very least, I tried to make the effort to let him know that this was not something that he should push on. Now, when you draw the lines, when you set your boundaries, if they continue to push, then you still want control. You still want to have some measure of restraint. Because obviously, if you fly off the handle, that's not okay. And you can't use your hot buttons as an excuse to fly off the handle. No matter what they're doing, no matter what the situation is, you need to have control over yourself, because that is the only thing that you truly can control. And so, I guess if there were a number four, it would be in situations where you have understood your boundaries, you've set your boundaries for yourself, you've directly communicated where the boundaries lie, and they continue to push, and you cannot remove yourself from the situation, you need to still have some level of restraint. And you still need to be very aware that every action that you take, verbal, physical, or otherwise, has an equal and opposite reaction. And if you do something that you know is going to dig in and hurt that person, especially if you know that you're going to push one of their hot buttons, then you are to blame for the situation getting worse. And it is your responsibility to neutralize the situation in such a way that you are able to stand your ground, but also in such a way that you are able to get out of it with everybody more or less unscathed. And if that means being the bigger person and coming back and apologizing, and if that means laying out where you went wrong and where you should have handled something differently, then that's what that means. So I think I'm just kind of rambling at this point, but the point is, don't let your emotions and your hot buttons and the things that really upset you be an excuse for your actions that affect others negatively. Because at the end of the day, no matter what the circumstances were, we're still responsible for our actions, and we need to take accountability for them. So I think that's where I was going with that. Anyway, I'll catch you on the flip side.